So it's Friday, and it's going to be a little different because we had Community Day on Wednesday. So hopefully you had a chance to volunteer and reset. I always think that's a good process to go through. So today we're actually going to work on the discussion, the virtual pet simulation kind of lab here. We'll talk a little bit about the practice problems later on in class. And then there's the assignments. There's three choices. You have to do one of these three options for the assignments this week here. So here we're just going to walk through this lab here, this virtual pet lab. What we're going to do is have you take this code and move it into NetBeans. So there's some sample code under this. And I'm going to move that NetBeans. I think the easiest way is just to go to NetBeans, create a new project. Here's my ant project and call it something like Unit 5. Pet. And then I'm going to take the code here. I'm just going to take the public part of this, the main part of this code and paste it over this main part here. I'm also going to need the import, which is at the top. I'm going to take that and paste over at the top right after my package there. So you should end up with some, once you do that, code that can run. Shouldn't be any errors initially. And it starts off with the pet dragon. Your pet dragon just hatched and is awake. Your pet dragon is awake. What would you like to do? And I'm going to feed my pet dragon. So there's a menu here. I'm going to hit for 1 to feed the dragon. And if I feed the dragon, you feed the dragon, it goes to sleep. So I have a sleeping dragon. What would you like to do? I can ignore the dragon or I can pet the dragon again. If I ignore the dragon, it stays asleep. And then I can pet the dragon. If I pet the dragon, it wakes up and I can decide if I want to feed it or pet it there. This is a simulated virtual pet. I don't know if you ever have had virtual pets. So this is probably older, pre-you stuff, but there were these Tamagotchi pets and stuff like that. Did you have Yeah. You have one? Right. So these were little devices that ran basically all the time, and there were basically 3 buttons with 3 different actions you could do with the pets. And that's the idea here is we have a menu and we have a virtual pet, and it can be in different states there, and at different states you can do different things here. So this is here. But there are also different pets out here. This is Pleo. My Pleo battery is not working anymore. It's quite old, but Pleo it looks like I just saw that it might still be available. So now I'm thinking maybe I can get a battery for it. But again, it was just a pet dinosaur here. That you could interact with. It would move around. And Pleo has a couple sensors built into its skin and some eyes and stuff. So if you petted it and stuff, you could interact. It could tell what you're doing. I think our mascot today will be my little pet robot dog here. Again, and this has, once I turn on, it just has 1 button and I can pet it or I can ignore it. So I can really just do things for my pet dog is pet it or ignore it here, depending on what it does. It has a couple states it will go into. So we'll just let our pet doggy roam for a little bit. Really not just after a while. We'll let it go. So. Okay, so your job is to create your own pet like that. So again, go into the assignment, find the starting code, download the starting code, or copy the starting code into a project and run it. By default, it's a pet dragon. But again, you want to make it your own pet. So what kind of pet you want. And just so you're gonna have to go through and change these states. So maybe I want a pet dog. So everywhere it says dragon, I'm gonna say here. And then what are the actions? Do you want to feed or pet things? So change this interaction to whatever kind of pet you want. And I'm fine. I don't be creative. You're gonna have to post this, and we have lots of pet dogs all here. So it's fun if you're a little bit creative. So if you have your favorite Pokemon or something else there, you can do that for this and do some action. So get it to be a different pet and set it up. Now, this has two states by default, awake and sleeping are its two states, and we have constants for those states. And then we have a big loop that loops forever while true. And then it checks. If it's in this state, it displays this menu. So if it's awake, this is the awake menu. And then based on your input, it will set the pet state to either asleep or awake. And if it is asleep, you have a sleeping menu. And again, depending on which one you choose, what your choice is, it'll set the state to either awake or asleep. So look through this code, and then your job will be to add some more options and at least one more state to this. So we'll talk more about it, but get started, figure out what kind of pet you want. One thing you might want to consider is that we often diagram. This is what's called a state machine, and we often diagram. So here's the diagram currently for this. The pet starts awake, and if you feed it, it goes to sleep. If you ignore it, it stays asleep. If you pet it while it's sleeping, it wakes up. If you pet it while it's awake, it stays awake. So this is our different menu options here. And again, your job will be to add at least one more state and then some transitions. So what actions will lead to that state here with this? So it'll bring in your if statements and we'll talk a little bit about looping. So see how far you get started, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it in a sec. I'm going to walk through a little bit. So if you know what you're doing, you can just ignore me at this point. If you want some more help, I'll kind of walk through. So one thing we want to do is add another state. So like right now we have the pet can be either sleeping, awake, or sleeping. We go back and forth, and we have a couple actions there. So these are the states defined up here. One is awake, two is sleeping. I'm going to have another state here. Maybe I have a dog, and sometimes dogs get sad. So I could say final int sad as a state. I'm going to give it another number like 3. I could have another state if I want. I could say final int like angry. And give it a number if I want here. I could do, but you want to do at least one more state now here. And then in our loop here, we have a menu for each state. Here's the awake state. If the pet state is awake, we display this and we do different things. Here's the sleep state with this else if. So I'm going to copy this whole sleep state and make a new state for when they are sad, right? Sad was a state. So I'm going to add a new sad state here. So I'm going to duplicate the sleeping state here and make this for when they are sad. So in my comment, I'm going to say this is if the dog is sad. I did a dog. Yep, I did a dog. So again, I'm going to check if the sleeping state is, what did I call that? I called it sad, SAD, all in caps. So SAD there. Okay, your dog is sad. What would you like to do? And again, right now I say I can ignore the dog. And if I ignore the sad dog, what is going to happen? I'm going to say you ignore the dog, and it continues to be sad. And so its pet state is going to be sad still. If you pet the dog, so if you do choice number 2, you pet the dog and it is happy and awake. I don't have a happy state, I just have an awake state, so I'm going to leave that as awake. Awake kind of means happy, I guess, or not sad there. And I can try to run this. Now, the run is turned off here. So I have to turn this, because I'm still running this, I have to stop my run, and then I can run this again. So now I want to try to get to this sad state. So I'm going to try to pet my dog, and it's still happy. Pet my dog, and so what if I feed my dog? It gets sleepy, it's asleep, but there's no way for me to get to the sad state here. So one problem I have is that, so I've added this state here, and let's look at a little diagram. So right now I have the awake state and I have the sleeping state. Basically what I've done is made a new state. Oops, that I want to do a new shape. I made a new state called sad, and I display a menu, but I have no way of getting to that state there. So how do I get to the sad state? What action in these other states gets me to a sad state? So I would say maybe if my dog's awake and I ignore the dog, it becomes sad or something like that. So again, I'm going to go back and look at my current states and try to figure out, because I never set my pet state. Well, if it's sad, I set to state sad, but I never set it generally to sad here. So let's say if it's awake, I feed my dog, I pet my dog. I'm going to add another menu option here. So I can feed my dog, I can pet the dog, or while it's awake, I can ignore the dog. And again, you can set up your own menus, whatever you want to do. So now, and then here's my choices. If 1, that means I'm feeding the dog and it gets sleepy. If it's 2, that means I'm petting the dog and it stays awake. Now I'm going to add another option here. And if they choose to ignore the dog, you ignore your dog and it gets sad. And I'm going to change the state to sad. So now I've added this state. I should be able to get to this state. So again, I can run this. Again, when the dog's awake, I can say ignore the dog and it's sad. And then if I ignore the dog, it stays sad. If I pet the dog, it's back awake and happy here. So again, you want to add another state and maybe some more menu options to get to that state here. I think we're ready to, speaking of sad or sleepy dogs. Ready to go to sleep? You're very good. Good job. Just take a rest for a while. Okay. I'm going to interrupt you one more time here and talk about one more thing I'd like you to do is we want to modify the code to add a final state here. Right now, we have this loop. It says do here, and it loops all the way down to the bottom. It says while true. And this will keep looping while whatever's in this brace here is true, this Boolean expression, and we just write true, so it's always going to be true. We wanted you to add some final state so that at some point this ends, because right now, when this runs, it just runs forever. So I'm running it down here, here. It doesn't matter what I do, ignore the dog, pet the dog. It just always keeps running. It runs here. I actually have to physically hit the stop button to get it to stop here. So we want to add a state for it there. So right now, again, so I have let's see. I have an awake state and a sleeping state and a sad state, and I can transition between those. I want some state for, where this ends. So maybe you're thinking, well, maybe the pet has to die for it to end. I think Tamagotchis could die there if you did not feed them for a long time. So you can do that. I don't want my pet doggy to die, so I'm gonna have the doggy run away if I'm mean to it there. So if it's sad and I ignore it, it's going to run away. So I'm going to add one more state here, a runaway state or a left state or something like that. And if it's sad and you ignore it, it'll do. So again, we want some path there. So again, I'm going to have a new state for maybe run away. And the only way to get to that is if it's sad and I ignore it. So I'm going to go down to my sad menu here. And I do have an option. If you ignore the dog when it's sad, it stays sad. I'm going to say if you ignore the dog and when it's sad, it's going to switch to the runaway state. And I'm going to ignore the dog, and I'm not going to say, I'm going to say, and it runs away there. So now it can get into the runaway state, and then I'm going to set this up. So while, so what am I checking? I'm checking the pet state. While the pet state, do I want to say equals run away? How does this work? So it's going to keep looping while this is true. So this is saying loop while the pet state is run away, and that's not what I want. I want it to stop when it's run away. So I'm going to say like when the pet state is not equal to run away. So as long as it hasn't run away, I'll keep doing it, but and I'll keep being true and looping. And then when it does hit run away, it'll end. So now if I have that set up, I should, if I take my dog and I ignore it, and I ignore it again, you ignore a dog and it runs away and it quits. So again, we'd like to have some sort of quit state in here that you set up and modify so that this do loop does not run forever for this. Okay? See how that goes. Now, you may have seen this sort of state diagrams not in pets, but if you've played video games and paid attention, this is used a lot for like non-player characters in video games. When you're playing video games and you interact or you see a non-player character, their initial state might be wandering and they're just wandering around. And if you get too close, their state will change to attack and they'll start moving towards you there. If they get injured, their state might change to run away and they'll start moving away from you there. Or like if you're on some sort of game where you have to quest and you're just talking with some non-player character, initially their state might be that they haven't been visited. And then when you visit them, they'll tell you about some quest they want you to go on and their state will be set. And then when you come back and talk to them, they'll remind you of the quest. And then maybe if you go on this question, you return with some item and give it to them, then their state will be different, where their dialogue will be different. And so a lot of video games have this sort of stuff with non-player characters, where we have you'll just see them in different states, and different actions will cause them to switch from one state to the other. So, okay. So again, once you get done with this, you want to post it to the discussion so other people can try it out. So again, you just want to copy all your code here into your discussions there. You just want to start a new thread and post it there here. So, and a bunch of other discussions already here with their code for this. So you just hit start new thread and post your code there. By Sunday night, we want you to have your code posted here and some sample output possibly. And then by Monday, we want you to run two people's code and post your sample output when you're trying out their pets for that. So that'll be the discussion area. Couple quick things. We didn't get to the review problems. We'll try to do some of these next week. Next week, we're continuing to do loops. So we'll look some more at these practice problems. All these problems are problems we've done so far, and then we're going to add a loop around them to do something here in different ways. So we'll look at some of these maybe next week for this. The other thing is the assignment this week. There are 3 options, and they're all dice games here that you work with. So the first one is just you roll a 10-sided dice or pick a number 1 to 10 there. And then you, depending on what number you get, you try to guess if the next time you roll the dice, if it'll be higher or lower than that number. So like if I roll and I get a 3, I'm going to guess the next time it's going to be higher. So I'm going to say higher. If I roll, I get a 5, that's good. Now I want to keep doing that. Here, this is doing it without a loop, just does it once. I want to keep doing that. So now I have a 5. I'm going to say, will the next number be higher or lower? And maybe I'll say lower and I'll get a 7, and then it'll be higher and I'll end here. So you want to keep see how many rolls, how many times you can guess if the next roll is going to be higher or lower for that. So that's the first one. The second one is kind of like craps. If you've ever played that, I don't know that much about craps, so I know that this is kind of like that. In that we roll 2 dice, or we pick a number between 2 and 12, and that's what we call our knockout number here. And now we roll 2 dice and we try to get to that knockout number. So I roll 4 and 4, that's 8. That's not 12. I keep going. I roll 5 and 4, and that's 9. Still not 12. I roll 4 and 2, that's 6, still not. Finally, I roll 6 and 6, and that's a 12. That's my knockout number, and I count. Took me total 4 rolls to get there. So again, and then the third option is a similar one where you're rolling 3 dice and trying to get a high value for those. So you have to pick one of these 3 options to do, and again, that'll be due Monday here. And again, you just have to do one of them. Any questions on this? Okay, so I'm gonna close this down and call me up if you need help, but that's our goal for today.